آل قرآني حفظتم آي رحماني وفضلتم تلاوته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وبعد. Firstly, to extend my gratitude and to thank you for having me here. Alhamdulillah. It's always a blessing and an honor to speak in any of the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us and to make this small gathering a gathering which is written as a halaqa min halaqat al-dhikr. As Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that the halaqat of dhikr are the halaqat of ilm, the halaqat wherein the members of that halaqa are learning and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through learning the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. al-Islam. And the topic today, the 6 components of a living salah. And firstly, before we go into the 6 components that lead to a living salah, the importance of salah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, العهد الذي بيننا وبينهم الصلاة فمن تركها فقد كفر. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, the difference between us, i.e. the Muslims, and the non-Muslims is the prayer, and therefore the one who leaves off the prayer has acted like the non-Muslims. He has engaged in an action which is an action of the non-Muslims. It doesn't necessarily mean that he has left Islam, but he has acted like a non-Muslim. And so the salah, it's what defines the believer, it's what defines the Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ شَهَادَةَ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ اللَّهُ وَأَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ, to establish the prayer, the second pillar of Islam. And so it's a foundation for the household of Islam. And the first thing that a person is going to be questioned about on Yawm al-Qiyamah is the salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question a person about his salah first. And if we understand the importance of the salah, and there are so many texts that show us the importance of salah. You have to excuse my cough, my throat. The next point to talk about is what is the purpose behind the salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ, and establish the prayer for my remembrance. The salah is there to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a point which sometimes is lost upon many. Why? Because we get caught up in the kayfiyah to salah, how to pray. And you will find, especially those that are young, i.e. young students of knowledge, etc., they're talking and discussing and debating about how to pray. Do we raise our hands? We don't raise our hands. We place them here, place them here, place them on the side, and so on and so forth. And we can get lost in that, and we forget the purpose behind the salah. The purpose behind the salah being what? To establish the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our lives. If we think about the 5 daily prayers, the first thing we do when we wake up, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second thing, midday, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Evening, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the sun is setting, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And prior to going to sleep, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the salah, to remind us that we are going to turn back to Him, to remind us that we are going back to Him. And we're going to look at some points that relate to that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ, establish the prayer for my remembrance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ, that the prayer prevents a person from al-fahsha and al-munkar. Al-fahsha being illicit behavior, and al-munkar being sin other than the illicit behavior. And so the prayer, not only is it for remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's to keep us in check. And usually you will find if a person ends up falling into fahsha, illicit behavior, perverted behavior, the prayer goes first. The prayer goes first. The prayer, if our children, if we are praying, then bi-idhnillah, it protects them and us from illicit behavior, perversion, and so on and so forth. The prayer is very important. And if we look at the salah, as-salah comes from the word sila. Sila, meaning a connection. And the salah is silatun bayna al-abdi wal-rabb. It's a connection between the slave and his master, his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the purpose behind the salah is to establish that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَكُنْ مِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. Do not be from those who are in a state of ghafla, heedlessness, heedless to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, heedless to the purpose behind this life. And that's the state that we find ourselves in today, in society. Alhamdulillah, we have these safe havens. We come into these safe havens, the masajid, the houses of Allah. But you step outside and where are society? What's happened to society? They're in a state of ghafla, ghafilun. Why? Because they don't realize that time is running out and they're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're eating their days away, sleeping their days away, enjoying their days away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, مَتَاعٌ قَلِيلٌ. It's a small amount of time in this life that they are using to enjoy themselves, but they're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا يَغُرَّنَّكَ تَقَلُّبَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فِي الْبِلَادِ مَتَاعٌ قَلِيلٌ ثُمَّ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ وَبِئْسَ الْمِهَادِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not be fooled by تَقَلُّبُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, the change and the enjoyment and the lives that the non-believers are living. Don't be fooled by this. They're only enjoying it for a small period of time and then they're going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the salah reminds us of that. The salah is a reminder for us that this dunya is a test. This dunya is temporary. Our real purpose is what? To meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to use our lives in a way that's pleasing to Him. And the Prophet ﷺ, he used to see the salah not only as a reminder but also as a means of escape from the difficulties of this dunya. The Prophet ﷺ, when he used to ask Bilal radiallahu ta'ala to call for the salah, the adhan, he would say, "Arihna bis salati ya Bilal, arihna ya Bilal bis salah." He would say, bring us ease, ya Bilal, through the salah. Bring us ease. And the Prophet ﷺ, the salah for him was qurratu ayni. It was the coolness of his eyes. He used to enjoy being in prayer. Why? Because it used to take him away from the difficulties and the struggles of this life. And that's what the prayer is, especially for those that understand what's being recited, which we'll come to inshallah. And going back to the topic of the evening. So the question is, how can I have a prayer which is alive? How can I have a living prayer? Because many of us, we come to the salah and our prayers, we're praying but our prayers are dead, ritualistic. We raise our hands, we go into ruku', then we go into sujood, then we get back up. For some of us, we don't know the beginning from the end. The imam starts and the next thing we know, it's the end of the salah. And our thoughts were all over the place. So the question is, how can I have a living salah? Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he speaks about this in detail in his famous book, Ihya Ulumuddin, Revival of the Islamic Sciences. And he says, sorry, as I lost my place. He says, اعلم أن هذه المعاني أي المعاني التي بها حياة الصلاة. So that which leads to a living prayer, تكثر العبارات عنها ولكن يجمعها 6 جمل. There are 6 components that bring together all of the components that lead to a living salah. He says, number 1, حضور القلب. So we're going to go through all of them and then go into each of them. حضور القلب, so the presence of the heart. والتفهم, understanding of what is being recited. والتعظيم, أي التعظيم لله, so the veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والهيبة, being in a state of hayba. What does hayba mean? Means being in a state of awe and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والرجاء, hope. والحياء, and embarrassment. So a person may ask, how do these relate to the prayer? He says, فَلْنَذْكُرْ تَفَاصِيلَهَا ثُمَّ أَسْبَابَهَا ثُمَّ الْعِلَاجَ فِي اكْتِسَابِهَا. But we're not going to go through all of that. Why? Because we only have a small amount of time. So we're going to go through the details and try to summarize everything that he's mentioned in brief. So the first one, حضور القلب. And he says, وَنَعْنِ بِهِ أَن يُفَرَّغَ الْقَلْبُ مِنْ غَيْرِ مَا هُوَ مُلَابَسٌ لَهُ وَمُتَكَلَّمٌ بِهِ. So what does that mean? Basically, that one empties his heart of everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart, the Prophet ﷺ, he compared the heart to a vessel. Correct or incorrect? Correct. He said the one who continuously sins, what happens to the heart? It darkens and becomes like an upside down vessel. If you ask me for some water and you say, I'm thirsty, please can I have some water? And I bring you a cup and I place it upside down and I pour the water for you, I say drink. How much are you going to drink? Nothing. You're going to say, turn the cup around. What are you doing? That's the state of the heart that is constantly sinning. And so he says, أَيُّفَرَّغَ الْقَلْبِ, that the heart is emptied of everything which is enveloping it, clothing it, and that which is talking to it of distractions. Basically what? The dunya. So think now in the salah, what whispers do you have? What internal thoughts do you have when you're praying? For some it might be, I'm thinking about business. For others it might be, I'm thinking about my wife. For others it might be my children. For others it might be sports. For others it might be anything, hunger. It could be an array of things. So I need to understand what is it that's going on with my heart, and I need to detach my heart from those things. And in brief, in short, in summary, ultimately it's to detach the heart from this life. To detach the heart from this life. If I have difficulty concentrating in salah, there are two avenues that I need to check. Number one, am I praying in an area which is easy for me to concentrate? So, for example, if I'm praying and the carpet is bright, lots of images, I'm praying and there's something in front of me that's drawing my attention, things like that, I need to remove those things. And that's why in the masajid you see most of the carpets are plain. The masajid are kept, relatively plain, etc. Why? Because it's meant to be a place of focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not decoration, etc. That's the first. So to remove any immediate distractions. But then you have the internal distractions, and they are difficult. The dunya. So for some, as we said, money. For others, status. For others, food. For others, women. For others, whatever it might be. The dunya is of many types and comes in many shapes. And so I need to try to detach myself, take a pair of internal scissors and cut the string between myself and the dunya, and that's when I'll start to have focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the salah. A person cannot have love of dunya and love of akhirah. We have to choose one of the two. If you love the dunya, you're not going to be able to love the akhirah. If you love the akhirah, you're not going to be able to love the dunya. It's not possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, man has only been given but one heart. And so if we want to turn away from the dunya, we have to attach ourselves to the akhirah. And this is not a process which can be taken prior to the salah by a few minutes. It has to be a lifelong struggle. It has to be a lifelong struggle where I'm constantly fighting the dunya in my heart. And it's very difficult for us today. Why? Because we live in a society which is based upon love of dunya. We live in a society which is based upon what? Consumerism. You don't have enough. By design, you are programmed and challenged to feel, or not challenged, sorry, conditioned to feel that you don't have enough. You have a new iPhone, the newest one, iPhone 14. What's going to come out this year or next year? iPhone 15. Then what? The iPhone 16. What's the difference? Really, what's the difference? The camera, for example, they go from an X amount of pixels to an X amount to an X amount. But ultimately the picture is the same. The picture is the same. The slight difference in quality doesn't really, what does it add? It doesn't add anything. The speed, milliseconds. Okay, the internet app might open slightly quicker, and so on and so forth. All of these things, you're programmed to feel like I don't have enough. You have a car, the car functions. The car, there's nothing wrong with it. But you're conditioned to feel like you're not good enough if you don't have a car which is equivalent to the standard of the day, and so on and so forth. And apply this in every area of life. It's a constant, by design, conditioning to feel that you don't have enough. Enough of what? Enough material, enough dunya. Why? Because that suits the big corporations, the big companies. And so it's very difficult for us in our time today to detach from the dunya. It's a struggle. And we have to first recognize the sickness of society so that we can then deal with the internal sickness. Then he says, moving on to the next one, التفهم لمعنى الكلام. And this one here, there are no shortcuts. Having an understanding of the language of the Quran. And so Imam al-Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi, does anyone know when he lived, roughly?
1100.
Huh?
1100 CE.
1100 CE. I'm not sure about the CE. He lived roughly 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Roughly 1,000 years ago. So that would be what? Less than roughly that time period. So he lived roughly 1,000 years ago, and he lived in a Muslim society. When I say a Muslim society, I mean under Muslim rule. The official language of the Muslim state would have been what? Arabic. And even those lands that entered into Islam, when Islam was expanding, Arabic became the language that was spoken by the people. That's why now you go to North Africa, you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, you go to Southeast Asia, you go into Eastern Europe, parts of Eastern Europe. The Arabic language is a language which is spoken there. If it's not by the masses anymore, then it's by the scholarly class at the very least. Why? Because Arabic was the official state of the Muslim lands. And so when Imam al-Ghazali here says at-tafahum li ma'na al-kalam, to force oneself to understand, to push oneself, exert one's effort to understand kalam Allah when it's being recited in salah, this was something which was quite simple for many. Today, for us, for non-Arabic speakers, it's something which requires a lot of effort. Why? I have to take the time to learn the Arabic language. And so this is the shortcut to khushu', but it's not actually a shortcut in really. Why? Because you have to take 2-3 years out of your life. And there's no better way to spend your life than seeking understanding of the Quran. No better way to spend your life. You'll be rewarded. Alifun harf, wa lamun harf, wa mimun harf, as the Prophet ﷺ said. The one who reads the Quran, he's rewarded for every letter. Alif, lam, mim is not one letter. He said alifun harf, wa lamun harf, wa mimun harf. So what about the one who's studying the Arabic language to understand what alif, lam, mim actually means? There's reward in it. And so for the younger generation at least, for us to raise them upon a culture of Arabic. And Arabic language is what unites our ummah. If you think about how is it that America, the UK have extended their influence globally, how is it? The English language. It's not through the armies and the tanks and the planes, and no, it's through the screens and the English language. And the marketplace has become a point of English language. The Arabic language used to be that which united the ummah. The ummah was strong. Why? Because they were united upon Arabic. Even the non-Arabs, Arabic. Why? Because it's lughatul Quran, the language of the Quran, the language of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we have to have a mission of learning the Arabic language in our lives. And if I come to the salah, I've had a bad day, and I'm, asking myself, or I'm feeling down, I'm feeling low, what's the point? Why am I struggling? And then I'm reminded, I hear the Imam, he says, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ. Immediately, it reminds me of my purpose. When I hear the Imam, he's reciting about Jahannam. When I hear the Imam, he's reciting about patience. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اصْبِرُوا وَصَابِرُوا وَرَابِطُوا. And I hear the different verses about different areas. Perhaps I've had a real difficult day. Perhaps I'm having a difficult time with my child. And I come and the Imam is reciting from Surah Yusuf about the difficulties that Yaqub alayhi salam went through when Yusuf was taken away from him, and so on and so forth. So all of this reminds me. It reminds me. But the person who comes to the salah and they don't understand the Quran, they don't get that reminder. They don't have that reminder. And even if my mind starts to drift and I understand the Arabic language, I can bring myself back. How? By focusing on the Quran. I can force myself, focus. Even if it's just wal asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. And look, one of the shortest surahs in the Quran, but look at the profound meaning. Wal asr, by time. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Mankind is at a loss. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Except for those who have iman, and they have action, and they call to iman, and they call to patience upon this path. Look outside today. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Mankind is at a loss. Look at the result of mankind when they strip themselves of God. Go outside and have a look. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. So you come to the salah and you hear, even if the imam is just reciting wal-asr, it can have an impact on your heart. Why? Because you understand the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is something that we really have to focus upon. For the masajid to set up Arabic classes, for the community to take advantage of the Arabic. Even if it takes a person, one lesson a week, and it takes a person 10 years to eventually understand the Quran. So what's wrong with that? 10 years. If it takes 20 years, as long as I reach that goal. Then he says, the third one, at-ta'zeem. And at-ta'zeem, basically, to venerate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To come to the salah and you know who you are standing in front of. So how is it that you can arrive at having the veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your heart?
Sorry to interrupt you. Third point, you just simplify it. I'm just trying to make it
at-ta'zeem, so the veneration of Allah.
So recognition?
Recognition and veneration of Allah. Allah's greatness. So how is it that you can come to understand how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is? There's a shortcut. Oh yeah. There's a shortcut. What leads you to knowing the greatness of Allah?
Asma'ul Husna.
Huh?
Asma'ul Husna.
Even before you go to Allah's names and Allah's attributes. Huh? Not even the shahada. The non-Muslim doesn't need to know the shahada to come to the conclusion there must be a great creator somewhere.
So looking at the surroundings.
Looking at creation.
Looking at the creation.
Looking at the creation. At-tafakkur fi khalqillah. And some of the ulama of the past, they said, to spend the night in contemplation over the greatness of Allah's creation is more beloved to me than praying the entire night. Why? Because if you really look at the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you come to the conclusion, Allah must be great. Allah must be great. And today, go on YouTube, after this lecture, please, go on YouTube and type in the amazing universe, something of that sort. There are stars that are 5 billion times larger than our sun. Look at the greatest of animals that exist. For example, the whale shark. And look at the most minute, the ant. Which is greater in creation? They're both as great. Look in the mirror and look at ourselves. When you look at yourself in the mirror, the eyes. We're amazed by these cameras. What about the eyes? The lungs, the tongue. Think about the voice box. How many languages does man speak? How many languages? Some countries, they have hundreds of dialects or hundreds of languages. They all come from one voice box. The tongue. The tongue can move itself in such a way that it creates these sounds that we understand. The ability to understand abstract and to articulate abstract. What's greater, the universe or the mind that can manipulate the universe? So even just looking at ourselves, and we come to the conclusion, Allahu Akbar, Allah must be great. And so when you come and you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, خَالِقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, the one who has created the heavens and the earth. خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, the one who's created everything. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. There is not a dabba is مَا يَدُبُّ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ. There is not a creature that moves on this earth except that Allah is its sustainer and provider. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is providing and sustaining everything in existence from that which can't be seen. Bacteria. Who provides bacteria with its sustenance? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bacteria, living organism. Allah provides it with its sustenance. To the greatest, the whale shark. Animals that live in the depths of the ocean. Where do they get their food from? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one that decrees that these creatures are going to receive their food from up above when the fish and so on and so forth die and they go down to the bottom, they rot, and then these small creatures come and start to eat, etc. Allah is the provider, Allah is the sustainer. Think now, if you were to be invited to a gathering with a king of the kings of this dunya, whether you liked him or not, you were invited to a gathering. how would you present yourself to that king? What would you wear? What type of clothing would you wear? Would you be fidgeting? Would you be, moving your hat? Would you be scratching yourself? You would be acting in a certain way. Why? Because you know that he is a king. So what about Malikul Muluk, the king of kings? What about the one who, Jazakallahu khairan, what about the one who has the only dominion on the day wherein there is no dominion but his dominion, Yawm al-Qiyamah? Barakallahu fikum, Shaykh. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So when you think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that way, take time, try it. The next salah, Maghrib, try to remind yourself who it is that you're standing in front of. One of the awliya of the past, every time he used to make wudu, his face used to turn a different color. And he asked him, why? He said, if you understood who you're about to stand in front of right now, then you would understand why I'm changing color, why I feel this way. And so, when you think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that way, you venerate Him with your heart, you become a person who glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In your salah, naturally you're going to be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fourth, al-haybah. And Imam al-Ghazali, he says, هي عبارة عن خوف منشأه التعظيم. So, hayba, being in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's hayba? Hayba, basically, it's like being in a state of awe and being in a certain way in front of someone. Why? Because of you venerate and you fear that person. So with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we venerate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but likewise we fear Him. And so there's a hayba that we develop. The person who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he's in the salah, how is he going to stand? The Sahaba, it's mentioned that they used to stand so still in their prayer that birds would land on their backs. That's how the hayba that the Sahaba had. And so the fourth one is to develop that hayba, that awe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be in a state of veneration, which leads to us being in a state of awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the next one, al-raja. Al-raja is to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now, when you're sick, who is it that cures you? Allah. When you're poor, who is it that provides for you? Allah. When you're weak, who is it that strengthens you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you know Allah, there's no door that you will assume closed to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Al-Qadiru ala kulli shay. He is capable of over all things. Alladhi yuhyi wa yumit, the one who gives life and gives death. Muhyi al-mawta, the one who brings back to life that which has already died. And when you understand this, you understand that I should always be hopeful. No matter how bad my situation is, no matter how difficult my situation is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And think about the universe. Think about the universe. The universe is massive. We can't even comprehend the distance between our solar system and the next solar system within the galaxy that we currently exist within, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of light years. If the first of man were to leave the earth, we still wouldn't have reached now the next solar system. That's the distance. But this doesn't take from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ability to provide. It doesn't take from Allah's qudra. That creation means nothing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not able to grant us that which we ask for with ease? The Prophet ﷺ said, if the first of man, the last of man, the first of jinn, the last of jinn, were to sit on one plane, and they were to ask, or stand on one plane, they were to ask Allah, and Allah was to grant every single one of them that which they asked for, it wouldn't take from that which is with Allah, except the way that a needle takes from the ocean when you place the needle in the ocean. Allah's rizq has no limit, no boundary. And so when I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my heart is filled with hope. And when I turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with hope of what He has, not what I have. I don't ask Allah because I am me, I ask Allah because He is Allah. And so my heart is filled with hope. I don't look to myself. When I'm sinning, I still have hope. When I'm righteous, I still have hope. And so al-raja is, again, it comes from the ta'zeem. It's something which is born from knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last point, he says, al-haya. Al-haya. What is al-haya? To stand in a state of embarrassment. Embarrassment.
Well, feeling shy.
Feeling shy in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I feel shy and embarrassed to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because I know my sins. I know my shortcomings. I know my weaknesses. How can I stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can I possibly ask Allah for more when He's granted me everything that I have? Allah has given me my life. Allah has given me my knowledge. Allah has given me my ability to understand. Allah has given me my wealth. Allah has given me my health. Allah has given me my family. Allah has given me my security, my safety, my ability to digest, my ability to use the bathroom, my ability to sleep. Just think about what we have, that which we take for granted. How is it possible that we can ask Allah for more? You feel embarrassed. And then think about the sins. Think about the last sin that you committed, that you're aware of. Think about the sin before that. Think about the sin that came before that. And you slowly start to feel embarrassed. Ya Rabb, how can I stand in front of you? How can I ask you? And I'm in a state of constant sinning. And so you become munkasirul qalb. Your heart is broken. And you're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that moment, when you have a heart which is broken, that's when you're relying upon Allah's mercy. You're relying upon Allah, not upon yourself. You're not coming to Allah with arrogance, with entitlement. Some people, they feel entitled. I'm worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why aren't things going well? Because they don't understand. They don't really think about themselves. And we live in a time today, we sin more than we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because sin is so open. If you walk from the masjid to the train station, how many naked people are you going to see? How many? Nearly everyone's naked. How many times do you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when walking from the masjid to the station? For many, they see more naked bodies than they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we're constantly sinning. And we're in a constant struggle with ourselves. And so when you know that about yourself, you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're broken. You feel shy to stand in front of Allah. You feel shy to ask Allah. But it doesn't mean you don't ask. You ask, but you ask because you know Allah is Allah, not because you're you. You ask because He is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Kareem, Al-Mannan, Al-Wadud. And so you turn to Him through His names and His attributes of kindness and generosity and mercy, etc. And also, when you remind yourself of your sins, you remind yourself of your weaknesses, you remind yourself of your internal blemishes, what happens? The first thing that you're going to want to ask Allah for is what? Forgiveness and guidance. You're not going to be concerned with money and wealth when you're concerned with your akhirah. And so, just to recap, these 6 main points that were mentioned. Number 1, to rid the heart of that which it is attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To have a present heart in the salah. Number 2, to try to understand that which the imam is reciting in the salah, or that which I'm reciting in my salah, which requires learning the Arabic language for those that don't speak it. And number 3, to venerate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to at-ta'zeem, to become a mu'azzim, someone who glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the heart, who knows the greatness of Allah. And we only have to think about the creation of Allah to do that. And unfortunately we're stuck in a city, light pollution, noise pollution. Step outside of the city, go and look at the stars, look up at the stars when there is no light pollution. Look at what you see in the sky. Allah created all of that. And go online, look at the videos of what these things are. Our solar system alone. Look at the different planets, the gas planets, the rocky planets, the cold planets. Look at the sun. Think about gravity, think about time. What is time? How does it work? All of this leads you to what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about our bodies. Do you have to consciously pump your heart? No, it does it itself. Do you have to consciously breathe? No, you breathe naturally. Looking, hand-to-eye coordination. If I want to throw something at the door, I don't have to measure, I don't have to think. I just throw it. And I have the ability to accurately throw something at the door. How? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me that ability. All of this comes from the Creator. And that leads you to think, subhanallah. Literally, you think, subhanallah. Allah must be great. Allah is great. And then you come to the question, what does Allah want from me? How can I be grateful? And then, al-hayba, to have a state of awe about you in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then al-raja, to be in a state of hope. To hope for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. And likewise, to fear the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And lastly, al-haya, shyness and embarrassment in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for our constant sin, our lack of ability to fulfill that which is upon us of His right, and so on and so forth. And we conclude with that, inshallah. As I said, it was a short kind of introduction to the 6 principles, not to make it too boring or too long. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Any questions?
Sorry, I just want to so the first and the second one, what was the Arabic term for that?
The first one, حضور القلب. حضور القلب. And the second one, التفهم لمعنى الكلام. لمعنى كلام الله.
So the second one, sorry, was?
التفهم لمعنى كلام الله. التفهم لمعنى كلام الله. بارك الله فيك. Any other questions? No? So we conclude with that, inshallah. And to thank you again for having me. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to implement that which we've had. بارك الله فيك. بارك الله فيكم.